It's the debate about economy versus lives. Well, epidemiologists are now raising a red flag over a resurgence of COVID-19 cases in the country. Law enforcement authorities are also readying themselves to intensify spot checks and clamp down on irresponsible behaviour at social gatherings. I want to bring into this conversation now Professor Wolfgang Preiser, a virologist at Stellenbosch University. He says warning signs of an upsurge are here. Professor, good afternoon to you. The fact of the matter is that we are starting to ignore the rules. That is pretty self-evident, and that has very worrying consequences.
Indeed, you're right. And like when our pandemic started here in South Africa, we could look to the Northern Hemisphere and could sort of watch what had happened there and could try and do it better than they did at the time. The same is the situation now. Now, if you look at Europe, you will see that there is a very widespread resurgence, whether you call it second wave or, there are different ways of calling it. But clearly, the numbers look very bad. Same is true in North America. And yes, these guys are heading for they are in autumn and they're heading for their winter, which makes things worse because people are congregating indoors, whereas we are sort of in spring and heading towards summer. But ultimately, the issue is that the moment we relax our guard and we behave sort of without due consideration, this virus will turn back and bite us. And I think that's what these early warning signs are here to tell us. And I must also say that, much as I sympathize with everybody who's had a very rough ride through this, and, we know the enormous suffering and everything, the problem is it's not the measures. The measures are there to make the pandemic as light as possible on us so that the economy can recover within reasonable limits. So it's, for me, it's a wrong dichotomy to say that, it's the pandemic protection versus the economy. Actually, there isn't any economy to be had if we are heading for another catastrophe and we will end with a lockdown. And again, look at Europe and see what they are discussing right now and how many countries have actually gone back to more or less stringent lockdowns. And please, let's try and do better than that. And I think we can. Summer is clearly on our side. There's a lot we can do outdoors these days and weeks and months to come. We can keep our distance. That little bit of cloth is really not an issue. So if that is the condition under which I can sort of otherwise resume a fairly normal life and enjoy restaurants and going out and meeting people in smallish groups with appropriate distancing, then I'm going to wear it. It's not a big deal, really.
It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Professor, let me ask you this question. Sorry to cut across you. At what point do you start to worry then about that second wave? When do you start to call it, or are we already approaching that line in the sand right now in this country?
I suppose one could say that we are slowly approaching it. There are so many variables that it's very difficult to predict, as we've seen. So people change behavior. Some people will become very nervous when they read about it and will go back to a sort of a voluntary type of lockdown again. Other things will continue, like schools, and we know very well how important it is that schools continue. So I think the warning signs are there, and once we are on that upsurge where the numbers keep rising and grow exponentially, then we are really in a very tight spot. And this is where Germany is finding themselves now, and they're really worried that, what is 100 cases today, will just shoot up, and it gets out of control very rapidly. And that's the tricky thing with infections. One person can, if the conditions are ripe, like in such super spreader events, can infect many others. And then each of those, in theory, can infect many others. Many people will not infect a huge number, but some people will go on to infect many others. Then it just spins out of control. And this is really what we need to prevent. And I think we've done it before. It was harsh. Many people suffered. It wasn't nice times. Our lives have yet to return to something like normal. But please, let's not put this at risk by behaving sort of inconsiderate now. I think we've come a long way. Let's get the guys through their exams now at the end of the year and head for the big holidays. without another resurgence of the pandemic.
I suppose, Professor, it was always inevitable after 7 or 8 months that the slip was going to start to show. I was talking to a leading clinical psychologist in the first hour of the program who was referencing virus fatigue, where we are just absolutely sick and tired of it. And that is going to open up chinks in our armour, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that's what's happening, and I think it's a very human behavior. I mean, to be honest, I'm also quite fed up with it, and one is like, can it not be over? But unfortunately, the virus doesn't listen, the virus doesn't care, the virus just does its thing, and the virus just uses any opportunity that it gets to go and infect others and spread further. I would say that, when I catch myself thinking like, I've had enough of this now, I want to resume life as it used to be, then I think, if there are some simple rules, and we've all got used to washing our hands and sanitizing the hands regularly and wiping surfaces, wearing these masks, and then I think it's actually not that bad after all. So to be honest, I'm immensely enjoying the opportunity to go to restaurants again and do many activities that, are part of life. Very happy to have the child at school also. We've learned how important that is. So I regard this as a price to pay. But we need to be reminded, and I think it's also probably a question of bringing out the positives. And I think the positive news are that South Africa was badly hit by the pandemic, but we didn't do badly. We actually did very well, given the situation that we were in to start with. And I think we have no reason to be ashamed if we compare ourselves with other countries, even very advanced and very rich countries. So I think there's something to be proud of. And it's a positive thing. So I would actually appeal to people, let's continue that way. We've done very well, and we can continue.
And Professor, I am going to cut you there because